The first thing you notice isn't the chandeliers, or the sweep of crystal glass reflecting golden light. It's the silence beneath the sound. A ballroom humming with laughter, clinking glasses, and whispered deals, yet all of it feels hollow, like music played on a broken instrument. I had forgotten how this world smelled. Not of roses or wealth, but of polished marble, perfume that costs a month's rent, and the faint metallic tang of pride. Tonight, my stepmother Victoria's empire gleamed in the Lauren Hotel ballroom. 500 of the city's so-called finest gathered in gowns and tuxedos, clapping politely as if charity were theater. And maybe it was. I stood on the opposite side of the spectacle, balancing a silver tray heavy with champagne flutes. The starch in my white uniform collar scratched my neck as if to remind me where I belonged, or rather, where I had been placed. Not among them. Never among them. My name is Inver Toland. I am 29 years old. And tonight, I am both invisible and the most dangerous person in this room. Because there's one thing Victoria doesn't know. The man who makes her entire gala possible, the benefactor whose name alone keeps her throne intact, belongs to me in a way that will rip this room apart. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The night had started like any other service shift. Trays of caviar, waiters weaving through the crowd with synchronized precision, my fellow servers focused on delivering perfection. Yet every step I took into this ballroom felt like trespassing on a memory. I'd once attended events like this as family. I knew the smell of that piano polish, the cadence of my father's speeches. Now, I was nothing more than a silhouette moving silently between their laughter. Victoria spotted me almost immediately. I could tell from the way her hand froze mid-gesture, flute of champagne suspended as if time itself had betrayed her. Her face didn't crumple, no, that would have been too human. Instead, it hardened, smoothed into porcelain. A mask snapping into place. But masks always crack under pressure. Her daughter, Cassandra, leaned close, whispering into her ear with the exaggerated sparkle of diamonds on her wrist. A bracelet I remembered from birthday photos, the party I had not been invited to. Their laughter then had been the kind you could hear through walls. I had stayed home that night, pretending the silence was my choice. I shifted my tray against my palm, the weight biting into my fingers. Somewhere in this crowd, my father stood, likely rehearsing his loyal husband's smile. If I searched the faces long enough, I would find him avoiding my gaze, as he had learned to do. It would have been easy to disappear into the kitchen, to let Victoria win her silent battle yet again. But something inside me refused to retreat. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was the echo of my mother's piano, still standing in the old living room, untouched by Victoria's sterile hands. Or maybe it was the secret burning against my skin, hidden beneath the thin cotton of my glove. A simple gold band. The ballroom shimmered with chandeliers and lies, but under it all, a storm gathered. I could feel it in the air, heavy, electric. The kind of silence that follows before lightning splits the sky. As I moved among the guests, their conversations sharpened around me like blades. "Isn't that Robert's daughter?" someone whispered. "No, couldn't be, she works in a restaurant," I heard, serving at her own family's event. How humiliating. Humiliating. They said it like a curse. Like dignity was a currency I'd never afford. But humiliation only works if you bow to it. And tonight, I would not bow. From the corner of my eye, I saw Victoria moving toward me, heels striking marble like a metronome counting down. My chest tightened, but my grip stayed steady. I was trained for this. Service required calm and chaos. 5 years she had erased me, and 5 years I had built a life she couldn't imagine. Tonight, the walls of her kingdom would shake, not because I came to fight her, but because truth has a way of shattering lies with the gentlest touch. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A signal. 2 short pulses. He was close. And suddenly, I realized I wasn't standing in her ballroom at all. She was standing in mine. Victoria's approach was a study in choreography. Each step calculated, each smile still pinned to her lips like it had been carved from stone. People parted for her without being asked, like waves receding from a ship's prow. Power has its own gravity, and Victoria wore it like a crown. I had seen that walk before. Christmas Eve, 5 years ago, when she told my father that maybe Invra would be more comfortable celebrating with her restaurant friends. That was the first fracture, the hairline crack in the glass of family life. Since then, the fractures had multiplied until the whole thing was ready to shatter. Cassandra trailed just behind her mother, eyes flicking between me and the crowd. I could practically hear her thoughts. How dare she show up like this? How dare she remind everyone that we share the same last name? My tray felt heavier with every step Victoria took closer. The glasses trembled, though not from my hands, they were steady, trained. Years of service had taught me composure under pressure. I could balance that tray through an earthquake. But inside, my chest was a storm. The guests felt it too. Conversations dimmed into whispers. Eyes turned. Phones rose discreetly. This was the kind of drama high society secretly craved, scandal wrapped in crystal stemware. Then, from the corner of my vision, I saw my father. He stood near the auction display, surrounded by business partners and donors, laughing at something one of them said. For a brief moment, his gaze lifted and found me. Our eyes locked. A flicker, shame, regret, maybe both. But then his expression tightened, and he turned away, staring hard at a painting he had no intention of bidding on. That hurt worse than anything Victoria could throw at me. The deliberate not seeing. The cowardice of pretending I was air. My throat tightened, but I held my posture. Dignity, I reminded myself. My mother once told me that dignity couldn't be taken, it could only be surrendered. Tonight, I would not surrender. Victoria stopped just a few feet away. The scent of her perfume, sharp, expensive, suffocating, mixed with the hors d'oeuvres on my tray. Her eyes skimmed me, not as a person but as a stain on her marble floor. Invera. She said my name like it tasted wrong. Like it didn't belong in her mouth. My lips parted, but before I could speak, a ripple of whispers surged around us. Isn't that Robert's daughter? She's serving? Here? Imagine the embarrassment. Each word was a dagger, not because they were true, but because they were so small-minded. Behind Victoria, 2 men in black suits appeared, security. Positioned themselves as if I were a threat to national peace. My co-workers, the other servers, kept their heads down, continuing the rotations, pretending not to notice. But their eyes flicked toward me, subtle glances filled with unspoken questions. The string quartet kept playing, Mozart, delicate and precise. Yet every note seemed brittle, as though the music itself was anxious. And then, like fate reminding me it had its own script, my phone buzzed again. Against the rules. Against reason. But I knew who it was. 2 short pulses, his code. He was closer. I breathed once, steady, and met Victoria's gaze. She thought she had the power here. But she was already standing on glass that was about to break. The clink of crystal and murmur of voices dimmed until the whole ballroom seemed to hold its breath. Victoria didn't raise her voice, she didn't have to. Authority radiated from her like perfume, curling into every corner of the room. Security, she said lightly, as if she were commenting on the flower arrangements. This one doesn't belong here. The words slid through the air, polite enough to sound reasonable, sharp enough to cut. 2 guards stepped forward. Their movements were careful, rehearsed, professional men who'd escorted rowdy guests from events before. But their eyes flicked to me with the hesitation of men who knew this wasn't a typical disturbance. Whispers scattered like birds through the crowd. "She's not supposed to be here. Staff shouldn't mix with donors. Poor Robert, how humiliating." I kept my posture straight, tray balanced, chin level. If they dragged me out, they would drag out a statue. "Invera," Victoria said again, softer now, so only I could hear. "Don't make this harder. Step out quietly. We can pretend this didn't happen." Pretend. That was her favorite word. Pretend I didn't exist. Pretend family photographs were complete without me. Pretend my mother's piano in the old house didn't still gather dust in the corner. I breathed once. My lips curved in a faint smile, not one of surrender, but of clarity. "Funny," I said, my voice steady enough to carry. "You've been pretending for years. Why stop now?" Gasps rippled outward. People leaned closer. Phones tilted up, recording. For the first time, Victoria's mask cracked, just at the edges. "You were never supposed to be part of this family," she hissed. The words slipped past her perfect smile like poison leaking from a crystal glass. And there it was. The confession. The wound made visible. My father shifted uneasily near the back of the crowd, but he didn't step forward. He never did. His silence was louder than Victoria's venom. The larger guard reached for my arm. "Ma'am," he said quietly, almost apologetic. "Please." I stood still, breath locked in my chest. If I resisted, my coworkers would lose the contract. If I obeyed, Victoria would win again. Either way, I'd be erased. Then, footsteps. Measured. Steady. Each one echoing through the marble foyer like a drumbeat. The kind of walk that makes people turn before they know why. The main doors opened with deliberate grace. Not the service entrance Victoria had chosen for me, but the gilded double doors reserved for grand entrances. Every head swiveled. Conversations choked off. The quartet faltered mid-phrase. I didn't need to look to know who it was. My phone's signal had told me, but more than that, my heart knew the rhythm of his stride. Victoria straightened instantly, mask snapping back into place. Her eyes widened, not with recognition, but with calculation. She knew this presence meant power. She just didn't yet know it was the kind of power that would undo her. And suddenly, I wasn't afraid. Because the moment he crossed that threshold, the balance of this room shifted. The ballroom was suddenly too small for its 500 guests. The air itself seemed to draw taut, as though everyone had been holding their breath at once. The grand doors had not just opened, they had split the night in two. Marcus walked in like he belonged to the marble, to the chandeliers, to the hush that followed him. He didn't need to speak. His presence was a language all its own, and the room understood it instinctively. I hadn't seen him in days, business swallowed his time whole, but even from across the ballroom, I felt the charge that lived between us. Our secret, quiet for 2 years, pulsed like a heartbeat in the open air. Victoria was the first to recover. She adjusted her expression so quickly you would think shock had been part of her performance. Her voice cut through the silence, too sweet, too bright. "Mr. Whitmore. What an honor. We weren't expecting you until the auction." Her smile glittered like broken glass. Marcus didn't return it. His eyes scanned the crowd, the sea of gowns and tuxedos, before landing on me. For a fraction of a second, everything else blurred. Then his gaze dropped, brief, deliberate, to the glove on my left hand. He didn't need to see through fabric to know what it hid. My pulse thundered, but I stood still. Dignity. Always dignity. The guards hesitated, glancing at each other. Their orders had been clear, but the man who had just entered shifted the very ground beneath them. Even they sensed it. Victoria pressed forward, desperate to contain the moment. "Just a minor issue," she explained, her hand fluttering in my direction like she was shooing away a fly. "This server wandered into the wrong place. Nothing worth troubling yourself with." Her voice carried, but it was trembling beneath the polish. Marcus finally spoke. His tone was casual on the surface, but each word carried the weight of steel. "Is that so?" The room leaned in. Cassandra, oblivious to nuance, piped up. "She's staff, Mr. Whitmore. Just the help. My stepsister thinks she can crash our events because stepsister?" Marcus cut across her, smooth and sharp at once. Cassandra faltered, blinking, her diamond bracelet catching the light. "Yes. She's been difficult. We don't associate, apparently." His gaze swept back to me, then returned to Victoria. "Interesting." The crowd murmured, restless, alive with speculation. Phones rose higher, capturing angles, recording whispers. The word stepsister rippled outward, sowing unease. Victoria's smile flickered. "It's a misunderstanding," she insisted, louder this time, as if volume could erase the truth. "She doesn't belong here. You understand the importance of standards, Mr. Whitmore." Marcus tilted his head, studying her with a calm so absolute it was terrifying. "Standards," he repeated softly, tasting the word like a blade against his tongue. My stomach twisted. This was the fulcrum, the edge of the knife. If he spoke the truth now, the room would burn. If he stayed silent, I would disappear into the shadows once more. Every eye in the ballroom was on us. My father included. I saw him glance nervously between Marcus and me, his lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. He let silence strangle him. Victoria gestured sharply to the guards. "Escort her out. Now." They moved closer, their shadows crossing over me. My tray trembled slightly, not from my hands, but from the weight of the decision pressing down. Do I let them drag me away to protect the contract, my coworkers, my father's fragile pride? Or do I hold my ground and let the storm break? The music had stopped. The chandeliers seemed to hum. My glove burned with the weight of the secret beneath it. And Marcus, just a few feet away now, looked at me with a question in his eyes. "Are you ready?" The guard's hands hovered inches from my arms when Marcus stepped fully into the circle. The room bent around him, 500 people adjusting themselves without realizing it. Even the chandeliers seemed to steady, their glittering light catching in his dark eyes. "Before you touch her," he said quietly, "perhaps you should know who she is." The sentence detonated. Not loud, but sharp enough to cut through silk and smoke alike. Victoria's mask twitched. "She's a server. And she's disrupting my event." "Please, Mr. Whitmore, don't trouble yourself with your event." Marcus turned, his voice measured, deliberate. "Remind me, Mrs. Toland. Who underwrites this gala?" The silence was unbearable. Board members shifted in their chairs. My father looked at his shoes as though the marble might swallow him. Victoria's throat worked, but her smile remained pasted on. "Whitmore Holdings has been generous." "Generous," Marcus repeated. "Yes. $50 million generous." His eyes never left hers. "Do you think that buys me the right to ask a question?" Whispers scattered like sparks. 50 million. Victoria's lips parted, but he didn't wait for her answer. He turned to me instead, his presence closing the space between us. "Invera," he said, my name low and steady, carrying across the entire ballroom. "Are you ready?" My chest ached with every heartbeat. I nodded once. Marcus reached for my left hand. With slow, deliberate care, he peeled back the glove that had hidden me for 2 years. The thin gold band beneath caught the chandelier light, sending shards of brilliance across the marble floor. Gasps rose like a wave. One woman dropped her glass. It shattered, echoing the sound of Victoria's world collapsing. This woman, Marcus said, his voice cutting through the storm, is not just the help. She is my wife. Mrs. Ina Whitmore. The words hung in the air, impossible and undeniable. Cassandra choked on a sound, half laugh, half sob. No. No, that's not, but Marcus didn't look at her. His gaze stayed on me, steady, unflinching, protective. For the first time in 5 years, I was not invisible. Phones lifted higher, flashing, recording. The story was already leaving this ballroom, leaking into the world beyond. Victoria's face drained of color. She reached for the microphone, her fingers trembling. This is some cruel trick. Surely, Marcus cut her off with a laugh. Not warm. Not cruel. Just final. A trick? Then perhaps you'd like to see the marriage certificate. He held up his phone. A single swipe, a single document on the glowing screen, and the crowd surged closer to glimpse it. My father stumbled forward then, pale and shaking. Ina, why didn't you? Because it never mattered to you, I said, my voice clear, louder than I had ever spoken in that house. You let her erase me long before tonight. The words hit harder than glass breaking. My father recoiled, but I didn't waver. Victoria swayed, mascara bleeding into the corners of her eyes. You'll ruin everything, she whispered. No, Marcus said. You already have. And in that single moment, her empire cracked. Not with fire or fury, but with truth. The ballroom unraveled in slow motion. Conversations fractured into panic, phones lit the air like constellations, and Victoria's empire slipped through her hands faster than she could gather it. She stood in the center of the storm, trembling beneath the chandeliers she once commanded. Marcus's hand was still around mine, warm, steady, unshakable. The gold band on my finger was no longer a secret but a spotlight, refracting through the crowd's disbelief. For years I had been invisible. Tonight, they couldn't look away. But visibility is a strange kind of justice. It doesn't heal the scars left by absence. My father stepped forward at last, his voice cracking like old wood. Ina. I should have, you didn't, I said simply. The words weren't cruel, they were fact. His face collapsed, all defenses gone, and for the first time I saw him as he was, not my protector, not my betrayer, just a man too frightened to choose. Victoria swayed, gripping the microphone stand like a mast on a sinking ship. Her voice broke into fragments. You've destroyed everything I built. No, I replied, softer than a whisper but sharp enough to carry. You destroyed it the moment you decided my worth was measured in appearances. The silence that followed was different now. Not shocked, not scandalized, reflective. People glanced at each other as if wondering where else in their own lives they had mistaken image for value. Board members conferred in hushed tones. Donors slipped away. Cassandra fumbled with her fallen phone, her hands shaking too hard to press record. The empire of performance, of curated perfection, had collapsed under its own weight. And me? I felt lighter. Not triumphant, not vindictive, simply free. Later, much later, my father would sit across from me in a quiet cafe, his hands trembling around a cup of coffee neither of us drank. He would ask for forgiveness, and I would not give it easily. Some bridges, once burned, are not rebuilt but replaced with something smaller, sturdier, like a footpath built slowly with time. Victoria would reach out too, her messages threaded with desperation. I would answer with boundaries, not bitterness. Because dignity, I finally understood, isn't about revenge. It's about refusing to shrink yourself for someone else's comfort. And Marcus? He walked beside me, not as savior but as witness. He hadn't rescued me, I had chosen to stand. He had only brought the light that revealed what was already true. As I left the Lauren Hotel that night, I glanced back once. The chandeliers still blazed, but the music was gone, and the laughter had curdled into murmurs. It struck me that wealth can buy light, but it cannot make it warm. My mother used to say, worth is the one thing they cannot take from you. You carry it, even when no one else can see it. Tonight, the world finally saw. And in that moment, I realized, I had never needed their invitation to belong.